This is Real Estate Rookie episode number 85.
What I've always kind of wanted, the mindset around that was I wanted to be able to, it's not like I don't want to work anymore, but I wanted to be able to fit in work around life rather than fitting in life around work. Does that make sense? Like,
definitely.
I've always felt like, and I don't get me wrong, I have a really good job and I'm a manager, a part owner in the company. So it's a really good gig, but I always feel like life and family are getting the leftovers and I'm working in like, okay, yeah, I can squeeze in an hour here to go do whatever with my son or whatever. And I'm just like, that's not how I want to live my life. I want it to flip around.
My name is Ashley Kerr, and I am joined by my co-host, Tony Robinson. How are you today, Tony?
I am doing great. It's been a busy week for us. We've taken now 3 listings live on Airbnb in the last 2.5 weeks. So my head's spinning a little bit, but it's a good place to be in.
I love seeing how the Airbnbs come together when you and Sarah set them up on Instagram. It is so cool. You guys, they do the Airbnb experience. I mean, it is really unique. It's very Instagrammable, I have to say.
Yeah. What you don't see is all the background work of me having to go to Home Depot 4 different times to build this picnic table because the nets kept getting stripped. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are happening.
Yeah, but Tony and I actually did a call last week, and while we were on the call, there's the power tools going. I think it was the picnic table you were actually putting together. And one thing Tony has said to me, and I would totally relate to this too, is you've mentioned this to me a couple times, is that, wow, putting together furniture really tests your marriage. And my God, I cannot imagine being in a confined space putting together furniture for 2 days with somebody.
391 square feet, me and my wife shared for 3 days building furniture and with no directions, no words, but it's cool. We got through it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with this is how many have you guys done together by now? So you guys are turning into pros.
Yeah. So I'm losing track. Yeah. We're figuring it out now. What about you, Ash? What's new on your side?
Not much. Actually, this weekend I'm going to Portland, Oregon. It's a big secret. Actually, I'll be flying into Portland, then going to Bend, Oregon. So if you guys have not read Brian Murray's book, Crushing It, a super great investment book on multifamily real estate, and just it really goes through all things real estate as to getting started, going through the hard things, the successes, and building a team and a property management company and scaling up. So I highly recommend that book. But he's actually running an ultra marathon in Bend, Oregon this weekend. So a bunch of us are going and we're going to surprise him there. And we got t-shirts made with his face on it. And, we're just going to, show up and cheer him on and surprise him. So I'm really excited. He's a really interesting, awesome guy and, very humble, but always willing to, teach and help someone learn and grow. So couldn't have picked a better person to go run an ultra marathon.
That's beautiful. And I've only been to Oregon once, but it was so lush and green when I went out there. So it's cool. I love it.
I've never been. So.
Ooh, there you go. Exciting. Well, today's guest, what a phenomenal person we had on today, right? Ash and I were geeking out in our little chat on the side about all the great things this guy was saying. I can't, but so first I guess I should give you guys his name, but Justin Munk was our guest today. He's based in Utah, but he invests out in Ohio, and he gives, I think, really almost like a master class on how to build a team and effectively BRRRR out of state.
Yeah, and defining your market. We actually go through what you should look at when you're analyzing a market, things that, may be important, things that aren't important, and we go through an actual list of this is what you should look at and see if these are things that you want to analyze when you're looking at a new market. But yeah, building the team. And he's just very insightful and he described things very well. He talked about things that we bring up on the podcast, but almost gave a little bit of a twist to it, such as when an obstacle comes up, you're making an assumption that's an obstacle, but is it really an obstacle? So you guys listen through to the whole podcast, and at the end he gives his Instagram, and I think some of you will actually know who he is. You've seen his Instagram content, but just because he's always trying to help people learn and grow and become better real estate investors.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes by far. Justin was phenomenal. So you guys are going to love this episode.
Before we bring Justin on, let's hear a word from our show sponsor.
And if you guys are watching this on our brand new Real Estate Rookie YouTube channel, please make sure to like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. That way you guys are notified as soon as you drop a new video. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the content so far.
Justin, welcome to the show. Can you start off telling everyone a little bit about yourself, maybe even pre-real estate?
Yeah, you bet. I am super excited to be here. I've always been a big fan of BiggerPockets, so this is a dream come true for sure. Hopefully, I can share a few things that will help new investors to get started on their journey. When I first got married, we bought a townhome, and we knew that there was some potential to, rent it out, make some money, and kind of start that real estate journey there. I'd had an uncle that was very successful in real estate investing. So I'm like, there's got to be a way for us to get into this. So once we moved out to that townhome, we rented it out and everything was good. And, so I started like, all right, well, where do we go to get the next property? And we realized really quickly that in order to get that next property, we had to come up with 20 or 30% down or whatever. And I'm like, well, how many of those can I do before I, run out of capital, run out of money? And so I quickly learned that I needed a new way to invest in real estate. I needed to learn more about it. I grew up on a dairy farm, learned how to work really hard. And so I knew that if I put in some effort, got after it, I would be able to figure out a way to continue into real estate investing. And so dove in, discovered BiggerPockets and the podcasts and the books, and really learned about the BRRRR method, which was really intriguing to me because I could see a way to get my capital back and do more, or do another property and another property, and not be limited on just my personal capital. So that's kind of how I got started into it. Like I said, I have a full-time, I started in, I grew up on a dairy farm, have a full-time job in the solar industry. So real estate's always been something on the side, but I'd like that to become more of a full-time thing for me. And so, that's kind of where we're at now. We use the BRRRR method, and we invest long distance.
Justin, real quick, can you give everyone an overview real quick of your portfolio? How many deals you've done, how many rentals you have now?
Yeah, for sure. So we ended up using that townhome. We sold that townhome. I still have mixed feelings about selling it, but that was kind of our seed money. That was our capital, because we had lived in it for 5 or 6 years, and then we rented it out for 2 or 3 years. So we had some equity in it, and that allowed us to use that money for our next property. So that was the first one. The second one was the first BRRRR method, and we ended up not picking a very good contractor, and it didn't turn out to be the best deal. And we can maybe go into more details on that, but we learned a ton, and we decided that in order for our capital to go farther, we needed to go into other markets. The Northern Utah market, Idaho market is super expensive, at least from my perspective. And so we started looking into other markets outside. So now we own 4 in Ohio, and we're hoping to pick up another one this week, and they're all BRRRR properties.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I want to go back to kind of your mindset and what you were thinking when you bought that first townhome. What was your life like then? Were you working your W-2? What was your lifestyle like, and how did you make that jump, that leap, and get into real estate investing?
Yeah, the W-2. So yeah, I had the full-time gig, and I just knew I've never wanted to be the guy that worked till I was 65 and then retire, right? That's not what I've wanted. So I knew that I had to start building up other forms of income, other forms of wealth, so that I could retire early. And I know we talk about this a lot, retire early, financial independence. And I just feel like what I've always kind of wanted, the mindset around that was I wanted to be able to, it's not like I don't want to work anymore, but I wanted to be able to fit in work around life rather than fitting in life around work. Does that make sense? Like,
definitely.
I've always felt like, and don't get me wrong, I have a really good job, and I'm a manager, a part owner in the company. So it's a really good gig, but I always feel like life and family are getting the leftovers, and I'm working in like okay, yeah, I can squeeze in an hour here to go do whatever with my son or whatever. And I'm just like, that's not how I want to live my life. I want it to flip around so that I'm like, oh, I'm going to take a break from fishing with my son to close this real estate deal down or whatever. Like, I want it to flip around. And so that was the mindset going into real estate. And that's why we're like, okay, we got to figure this out. I knew there was potential. And so we just dove in and started learning. And that's kind of how we got to where we are.
Yeah, Justin, I mean, you brought up a really good point there. You didn't say it this way, but what you just described was your why. Your why behind your real estate investing is you want to make sure that you have enough time for your family and that your work activities fit in, like, don't detract from your family life. And for a lot of new real estate investors, I think the first thing that they sometimes focus on is just like the dollars and the cents of real estate investing. But it's such a hard path to get to the point of financial freedom through real estate investing that if the dollars and the cents are the only thing that's motivating you, there's a high chance that you're not going to persist through all of the struggles, through all of the obstacles, through all of the challenges that come along the way. So I guess just a word of advice to all the listeners is take a page out of Justin's book and tie your motivation to something bigger than just the money. Justin, I want to go back to something you said, because you said that you've used this strategy because you initially ran out of capital. But for the listeners that aren't familiar with the BRRRR strategy, what is that? Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, so I love the BRRRR strategy. Obviously, you know that if you're picking up real investment properties, you're usually having to come up with 20 or 30% down if you're not going to live in it. House hacking is another strategy, which is awesome too. But I have a wife and 4 kids, so living in this one side of a duplex is tricky for me. But the BRRRR method, so you're able to buy a property, you rehab it, and then you rent it out, and then you refinance your capital back out. So it allows you to, let's just say, like this deal that hopefully I pick up this week, we're going to offer like $41,000. We might put in maybe $10,000 into the rehab. It's probably worth $70,000 or $75,000. So the bank, my bank, I'm looking for other financial solutions, but some banks will go 70% loan to value. Some will go as much as 80% loan to value. So they are giving you a long-term loan, a cash out refinance. So you have a mortgage on the property, and then you get, that total investment, call it the $51,000, you get that back out. And now you get to go do another property. You have zero money in the deal. Sometimes there's $2,000 or $3,000 left in the deal, depending on how it comes together. But you have zero money left in the deal. You're cash flowing, and now you have your money to go do it again. And that, to me, was the ultimate way of being able to repeat it and scale a portfolio over time.
So many people in the BiggerPockets community leverage the BRRRR strategy for all of the reasons that you just recommended. It allows you to recycle your capital over and over and over again. You talked about your markets. I just want to go back to that really quickly. You said you started investing in one market, if you can remind us what that market was, but you moved into a second market. I want to know, how did you identify what that second market was? Because I think a lot of people who are looking to get started in real estate investing, one of their pain points or one of their obstacles is trying to decide, where do I invest? So I'm curious how you landed on your second market.
So yeah, I live in northern Utah, so that was obviously kind of where we started looking, but an average 3-bed, 2-bath in this market is $150,000, $170,000, where I'm picking up 3-bedroom, 1 or 2 bath in Ohio for $40,000 or $50,000. And so I'm like, I didn't even have enough capital initially to start in this market and to pick those up, because we're buying cash, right? We got to buy it outright. So we had to go to a different market. And my tip here will be, it sounds so simple, but just Google it. Like, just if you start to research, just Google it. Like, there's so much data out there that's available, whether it's BiggerPockets or other members of BiggerPockets and their own resources. Like, there's so much data out there. So, I mean, for example, if you're looking into the Memphis area, there's a company there, a group that they have a podcast, and all they do is they break it down every zip code every year. And it's like, so all I have to do is like, oh, here's a Memphis property that I may be interested in. I go to the podcast episode where they cover that zip code, and I learned about that zip code. The data is so available to us. The forums in BiggerPockets are obviously huge. For me, in deciding to go to Ohio, I was following somebody on Instagram, And I could tell that he was investing out of state. I'm like, where are you investing? And he said, Ohio. And I'm like, hey, can I pick your brain? I think I paid him like $100 for an hour of his time, which is crazy. But what it did is it shrunk the kind of the research period down. In an hour, I knew what markets what neighborhoods to invest in, what neighborhoods to avoid, some of the tricks of the market out there with the point of inspection and things like that. And so just within an hour, I felt really comfortable of where I was investing. And I think like within a few days, I was making offers. I mean, obviously I had to build my team and stuff like that, but we were on our way really quickly, not taking months to do the research. So long answer to your question, but leaning on people that are already doing it, leaning on just Googling it, looking for the resources that are already there, we can get a long ways with just those resources.
Justin, I think a big thing to point out, though, is not that you reached out to this person and not that they helped you and cut your time down, was that you actually did the research first. You Googled it first, then you approached them. So it wasn't just, a DM that said, hey, what should I know about your market? Or can you tell me everything there is to know about that market? You had already done some research yourself. So it wasn't like you were an Ohio market rookie coming in. You had some data already and you had a foundation so that they didn't have to take the time to teach you those steps. You could easily Google and you could spend that hour with your $100 getting more valuable information of stuff you couldn't Google or easily find. So I think that is huge right there, because we talk so much on the podcast about finding mentors and, what questions to ask. And I think that right there is Google everything you can. And then after that, go and get their opinion on what you have actually found out.
Yeah, Ashley, you bring up a good point too, because Justin, maybe you can share like what data were you looking at when you were analyzing those different zip codes? Like what did you see in the data to make you say, okay, this is a good market for me?
I used that Memphis example just as an example, but in Ohio, I felt like I could figure out, I knew the BRRRR method and I had looked at properties and I could see what properties were going for that were slightly distressed and may make a deal. I was using the BiggerPockets calculators, obviously, to run the numbers. But the only thing I didn't really know, and that was crucial for me to get from this investor, was the markets. I could talk to property management companies and agents, but I wanted to get from an investor, like what were not markets, but the neighborhoods to avoid and the neighborhoods to focus on. I felt like that was the missing piece in the data, that was the one thing I was afraid of, was like, I just got to make sure this is in a decent neighborhood. And sometimes it's just really hard to tell. I know you can use like the crime maps on Trulia and things like that, but I don't think that's super fine-tuned. I think it's generalities. And so that was the data that I needed from that investor, that coach or mentor, I guess, is just, okay, now that I have all this data, I know it's a good market. I did the population trends, who are the employers. I did all of that stuff. All I needed from him really was like, okay, what zip codes do I go to? And that was really where we fine-tuned everything. And I was able to feel pretty confident in making offers.
I just pulled up my market analysis worksheet here that I use with each thing that I look at. So I was wondering if you guys wouldn't mind, I can read through it real quick, and then I'd love to get your guys' feedback, because you both, are investing out of state and finding new markets, and see what things should be added or what things you don't think really matter at all. Okay, so the first one is job industry, population growth percentage, average home value, average rent, price to rent ratio, tax assessment percentage, and then anything unique with the utilities. Like I had to introduce Tony that some houses have wells on them and explain what a well is. Seasonal maintenance, such as snow plowing, any specialty insurance, such as earthquake or flood insurance, the average age of the renters, the average education level, percentage of homeowners versus percentage of renters in the area, the crime stats, school district rating, average age of properties, and then average vacancy rate in the area from other landlords. And then lastly, what kind of exit strategies do you have? Like if you're buying a rental, is there potential to sell it? If it's a single family house, sell it and flip it or something like that.
That's super thorough. I mean, that's even beyond what I did. And that's awesome. Yeah, that's a good list.
I'm looking through. So like I did something very similar when I first started investing too. So I pulled up that old spreadsheet that I had, and I think you hit on pretty much everything that I had in here. I did have some stats on vacancy, multifamily versus single family. I think the only other thing I had on there was the school ratings. Like, so for each, and I was doing it by MSA. So by each MSA, like what were the great school ratings? But I think everything else you pretty much hit. Maybe there's like any other economic anchors in those markets as well. You know, like, is there a big Amazon hub that just got built, or is there some, you know, I don't know, whatever the other economic anchors might be. But I feel like everything else, you got a pretty exhaustive list.
Yeah, with the job industry, I think it's important to point out too, is make sure there's not just one job industry too in that market. You know, maybe there's 2 or 3 that are supporting it, because if that, you know, business fails or they move locations, then you just lost most of your potential renters. Justin, what are some of the things you think that really don't matter when analyzing a market? Like, what are some of the things that you didn't even look at because they don't align with your goals? Because some of these things, they could not matter to anyone because they're looking for appreciation. They're not looking for cash flow, or vice versa. So what are some things you don't care at all to even analyze in a market?
That's a great question. For me, I had some people kind of challenge me like, hey, well, Ohio's not like a real high appreciation market. And it's not. It's felt that way the last 6 months though, but it's not an appreciation play. For me, I want cash flow. So for me, I'm able to rent these properties out for well over the 1% rule, which is awesome. I mean, they're worth they're worth $70,000 or $75,000. They're renting for $950 or $1,050. And so the rental ratio is awesome, but I know that the appreciation isn't going to be as great as other markets, but it's also not going to swing the other way as bad as other markets. So I feel like I'm safer there in some regards because I won't see the swings. It'll just be consistent rental income, and that's ultimately what I was after. So I wasn't going to these super hot markets that were appreciating like crazy because that wasn't what I ultimately wanted. I'll still get the loan pay down, so I will build equity in that fashion, but not necessarily through appreciation, although it's starting to appreciate kind of like crazy right now. So yeah.
Justin, you know, something that comes up a lot from the real estate rookies is this idea of analysis paralysis. Right. They read the podcast. They listen to the podcast. They read the books. They're active in the Facebook groups. But for whatever reason, they can't get started. And one of the things that holds people up is this idea of trying to find the perfect market. And, you know, I just want to give my thoughts on it. I'm curious what both of you think. Right. But for me, that the first market, as long as it's not a city that's on fire, and as long as you can find a deal that makes sense in that market, then I think you should pull the trigger. Even if it's not somewhere that you want to invest in for the next 30 years, there's always an opportunity to exit that market if things don't work out. But for me, if you're a rookie that's done 0 deals, what's more important than finding that very first or perfect market is getting the first deal done. So Justin, I want your insight, and then actually we can go to you afterwards because I know you're in the process of looking for a new market as well. But Justin, for you, how did you move past the analysis paralysis? Was it that conversation with that other investor, or was it something else that helped you kind of take that leap of faith?
It's so fun. It's a great question because this, as I've kind of spoke to other people that are trying to get into real estate investing, they do the exact same thing that I did. I'm a perfect example of talking myself out of deals. So finding the one little booger that's on the deal and being like, oh yeah, no, we can't do this. Like, oh, that's just too much risk, or that assumption is too big, or whatever. And so I talked myself out of a lot of deals before finally the same investor that was kind of that mentor, he messaged me out of the blue because I'm like, the whole time I'm sharing this on social media, showing the deals, and I'm talking about, oh yeah, we decided not to offer on this property. He, out of the blue, he calls me out. He DMs me and he's like, I can't remember what he said. Something about like sabotaging the deals, like talking myself out of these deals. He's like, you got to stop it. And so it was a wake up call. I'm like, you know what? You're right. And so I've learned over time now that there is no perfect market. There's no perfect deal. There's no perfect scenario. There's no perfect time. You're right. There's always going to be some unknown. There's always going to be some calculated risk or assumptions that we're making. But that's why we as investors make money, is because that's the value we bring, is we figure this stuff out. We make the calculations and we jump. There will always be some point in your real estate journey, whether it's the 5th door, the 1st door, maybe even the 100th door. I don't know. I'm not there yet, but where you have to jump into something new. You have to take a little bit of a blind jump. Otherwise, you're never going to accomplish anything. So that was it. Like, not looking for the perfect deal and understanding that there really is no such thing. And then having that investor call me out on it. In fact, I messaged Brandon Turner one day. Surprisingly, he responded to me. I'm like, hey, these numbers don't work. Like, I'm not getting all my money back out on these BRRRRs. And he's like, yeah, like, I very seldom get all of it. Like, the perfect BRRRR is even a rare scenario. So that was super liberating. And I was way more confident to jump into deals after I kind of figured that out or got that mindset.
Justin, that was like I love your response to that one, man, because it was a change in mindset. Not a change in knowledge, not a change in, some kind of technical skill. It was a switch in your mind that went off that said, this is the change that I need to make in order to be a successful real estate investor. So for all of the rookies that are listening, I want all of you to go back, re-listen to that last 60 seconds over and over again, because that's what elevated you, Justin, to be able to move into that second market and finally find success. Ash, I want to get your input. I know you're looking for another market as well. Like, at what point do you feel you'll be ready to make that leap?
Yeah, I don't know. This is where I struggle, is that I go and I search out for these other markets, and then I find this perfect opportunity in my current market, and then I get distracted. But I think that one thing for me that kind of holds me back is that it's finding your team. And that's always been the struggle for me. And I'm part of me is to blame because I'm not putting in the work to actually find a team in different markets. And, I had done Houston, Texas, and I have a team there. I just haven't found a property there. But, yeah, I think, you got to find the market, but you also have to make sure that there's the people and there's the team to help you in that market too. Brandon Turner, we can bring him up again. He had done this post recently on his Instagram saying, what he looks for in a market. And one of the things was there must be at least 6 property managers available for him to pick from in that market before he will invest in there. And I think that's a great thing because you can get caught up on, what's going to be your return? What's going to be your cash flow? What, are you going to have renters and stuff like that? But also, are you going to have the boots on the ground? Are you going to have someone that can show that apartment for you? And yes, there's tons of ways to manage your property, remotely, and you can set up keyless entry and stuff, but you're still going to need a handyman to come in. You're going to have to still find those people. So I think that's where I struggle the most, is not really analyzing the market, but really finding the people in the markets. And even close to me where I live in, from my house, I invest probably 30 minutes north and 30 minutes south of my house. Well, the same people I have, helping with maintenance on those north properties don't want to travel an hour south. So I have to find different people there. But that would be my recommendation, is make sure that you're not just analyzing the market, but you're finding your team in there too. That's
a great point, Ashley. Justin, how are you finding and building your teams in that new market that you selected?
There was a little bit of luck. Like we ended up finding some good people to help us out. I started out, so once I had identified Ohio as the place I wanted to go, started out on BiggerPockets.
We don't mind.
I'm banging on that thing a lot today, but the BiggerPockets, yeah, I know. I bet you don't. But it's such, it is a phenomenal resource. So I went to BiggerPockets. I'm not sure what tab it is, but basically where I can search, I can network with people. I can say, hey, I'm looking for this type of person, like an agent or a property management company in this market. Search, and they got, whatever it is, 45 property management companies. And I just started to message them right through BiggerPockets. You can message them, so I'm not having to email or whatever. I'm just message them through. I messaged like 25. Hey, I'm going to Ohio. I'm an out-of-state investor, and I want to see what you guys can do for me. So, and sure enough, you message 25, and really only 7 or 8 even respond. So there's sign number 1 of who you want to work with, because I like that they're active on BiggerPockets. I like that they're paying attention. So those obviously shortlisted themselves pretty quickly. And then I just had conversations, and I wasn't so concerned about, and maybe this is a detriment, but I wasn't so concerned about their fees and how they compared with other companies. What I wanted is responsiveness. I wanted them to be super responsive. I wanted them to be big enough that there was a team, so it was everybody had their responsibilities. It wasn't just like a 1 or a 2-man show. And with the one that I ended up picking, they were super responsive. I could tell that there were different people in the different departments. So I was talking to, the leasing agent wasn't necessarily doing everything. Like it was diversified a little bit. So this company kind of rose to the top, and I did the same thing. Well, they ended up having an agent in house because they're a brokerage also. So they recommended an agent, and he ended up working out really well. But I also did the same thing for an agent, same BiggerPockets tool. Search the agents, start message them, the people that responded or obviously shortlisted, and then I just started interviewing them. And I just started sending them properties. I'm like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And the people that were the most responsive, like, even outside of business hours, because Ohio's 2 hours ahead of me, so I would be finally getting to real estate after 5, 6 o'clock my time. So it's 8 or 9 o'clock their time. But if they were responding, that was a really good sign that they wanted to help me out. And so that eventually, I've narrowed it down to 2. And the one that was already with this property management company kind of rose to the top as being the most helpful. So that was kind of how I found the agent, property management. Then the agent had a contractor that they referred me to that he'd done work with before. So that's right where we started with the contractor. And luckily, he's been really good. I don't think that usually happens. I think you got to go through 2 or 3 to find the right one. But this one, we kind of lucked into a great contractor right out of the gate. And it's been pretty good so far.
Justin, I just have to say that the ones you were sending deals to who didn't respond, it's because they went and bought those deals that you sent to them. So that's why you never heard back. If anyone wants to take Justin's route and find an agent through BiggerPockets, the link to that is biggerpockets.com/agent. And you can search the market you're looking in, and you'll pop up agents that are available in those areas. So Justin, let's dive into one of your deals. Let's hear all the numbers. I'm going to just ask you a couple questions real quick before we get into the actual story of it. So what deal do you want to talk about today?
Do you want a good deal or a bad deal?
The most, whichever one is the most educational, probably for the listeners.
I'm going to do some fire rapid questions at you real quick, and then you can go into the story. How did you find the deal?
On the MLS. Yeah.
Okay. What was the purchase price?
I think it was $42,000.
And what kind of strategy are you using this for? BRRRR?
So we did the BRRRR method. Yep.
Okay. And what was the rehab cost on it?
This one was I think it was $12,000.
And is it fully rented now?
Yep.
All done with it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, we'll save so you can tell us, is this the good deal or the bad deal?
This is the good deal. Yeah, this is the good one.
The good deal? Okay, so you don't have to tell us how it worked out yet. So go ahead and tell us the story of how you acquired it, things you learned along the way, and then at the end, let us know, what's your cash flow, what did you refinance at, and how did it work out for you?
Yeah, so this is one of I think this was the first deal in Ohio, and it was important because we proved the model. We proved that it could work. So what we learned was, hey, we can do this. Which was a big thing for me because, just knowing that it can work and I can succeed just like all the guests on the BiggerPockets podcast, that was important to me. Just knowing that the model worked and that we could succeed in it. So we bought the property. It went really pretty smoothly as far as through the rehab. And we learned how to work with that contractor, how to communicate, there was definitely some things that I should have been more clear on, as far as what exactly he was going to do in the rehab. So I've been fine tuning that over time now. Okay, this is great that's your price. This is your very vague scope of work, but I've learned that I need to be a lot more specific, because when he comes for that, whatever the second payment or whatever, it's nice to know that he actually did certain things in the scope of work. So the more specific that scope of work is, the better. That's been a kind of a tough lesson for me to learn, but that's one thing we learned on this first deal. It ended up appraising, I think it appraised for $75,000. And so we're able to get all but a couple $1,000 out of the cash out refinance. It's renting for $950. So I think there's just under $300 of cash flow. So it's been a good property for us. Been our favorite for sure. Yeah.
Justin, I have one follow-up question. So I brought it up on Google Maps here. Utah is 1,712 miles away from Ohio. That's a very long distance. And I think a lot of people have fears of not just investing out of state, but even more so managing this rehab from out of state. So you already kind of touched on the scope of work and how you've made some tweaks to that. But A, were you nervous about managing a rehab from such a far distance? And B, what are some of the things you felt that you did that made managing that rehab successful?
Yeah. So, I mean, anytime that I tell people that I invest in Ohio, they just look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. Like they just don't understand. But the way I look at it is, honestly, I'm the real estate investor. I'm not the contractor, not the property management company, and I'm not like an inspector. So I know what a distressed property looks like, and I know what some of the big issues are, but I don't know the finer details, and I don't know how to rehab a kitchen. I've never done it. So I tell people that I'm like, well, I would probably use this. So I kind of have a method of checks and balances to make sure that no one team member can take me too far astray. So, we have the agent. He obviously wants to sell me or help me buy a property. So he's a little bit biased as far as, it'll be a great deal, not just a little light rehab, So he has his biases, which is fine. But then I have a contractor. As soon as we get into contract, and I always have an inspection contingency. I think that's crucial. It may eliminate some deals for me, but it's a safety net for me. Once we're in contract, I have the contractor go over there, and he can say, "Oh, whoa, this is way more rehab than we're thinking." So he can kind of check what my agent was saying. Anyway, he walks through it. He gets me a rehab. I then pay an inspector. Home inspector to go through it every time. And some people might cringe at that. I know it's like $350 every time, but this is my eyes. Once he's gone through that property, I get like a 75-page report with like 100 pictures. Like, I've seen every nook and cranny of that house, even though it's 1,200 miles away. So people say, well, how are you buying these places without seeing them? I'm like, I've technically seen them. I haven't walked through them, which would probably be bad. I'd probably just get all emotional about the deal and find a thing wrong with it to not do it. But it actually works better. But so the inspector goes through it. So he's holding my contractor and my agent accountable and their opinions of the deal. He's also going to add a few things to the scope of work that the contractor may have said, that's going to be a little bit hard. We'll just leave that out or whatever. He's got everything. So now I go back to the contractor. I'm like, hey, these things need to be added to the scope of work, and we adjust his number. And then if all that's checking out, we start we close, we start the rehab. The final member of the team that's kind of checking again is the leasing manager, right? So she's walking through the place, and thank goodness, she is like super picky. And so she's holding the contractor I'm paying the contractor based on what she's telling me has been done or not. And if there's like a light fixture that's still loose or a light switch that doesn't have a cover on it, she's telling me about it, because that's obviously a safety issue. That's a rental, she wants it to rent well. So now she goes through and she says, hey, these things still need to be addressed. And I go back to the contractor. I'm like, hey, these things were in the scope of work. You didn't do them, or these things were missed. Please add them to the scope of work. So now I have another checkpoint where my leasing agent is now, the property management company is now holding my contractor accountable. And so I feel like that hedges my risk a little bit. Now, obviously, it could still spiral out of control, but that keeps me a little bit safer. Now, obviously, I'm still putting a lot of trust into these people, and that's just one thing you have to get comfortable with. But I feel like that check and balance system of those four people is really kind of a safe way to do it. I'm
so glad you brought that up. That is really great advice, because it can be so easy, I guess, or so exciting, like, oh, I found one perfect person. I only have to manage one person. They're going to do it all for me. But really, you made a great point. It's the checks and balances. Just like if you were running an office, you wouldn't want the same person to manage the bank account, write all the checks, take care of the cash. You would at least want another signer on the check, or, someone else inputting the payables. So I think that's great. And that's a great way to look at it, is having those checks and balances of, in the process of your team. So are those your three main team members right there? The property manager, is the property manager and the leasing agent the same with the realtor? They're all within the same company.
They're the same company. Yeah, they're the same company, but different positions. Okay. So there could be some conflict of interest there. I keep an eye on that for sure. But yeah, so the agent, the contractor, the inspector, and then the leasing agent are kind of the team members that I use out there. I mean, yes, I have a I have private money and I have lenders and stuff. But as far as acquiring the property, that's the team I use for that check and balance system, which has kept me pretty safe.
Do they have within their maintenance division, do they offer any remodeling inside of that? Like my property management company, they will do, big remodels on the properties, and I get a quote from them. And usually it's a little bit higher than if I don't use them, but it's kind of a convenience, I guess, but you are paying a premium. Do they offer that to you, but you have your guy already?
They do offer that, and I haven't used it yet. I try and keep my contractor so busy that he doesn't have time for any of the maintenance stuff. So like we're turning a property right now into a new rental, or we're getting a new renter, a tenant in it. And so there's some maintenance stuff. So I use the property management company to do that kind of stuff because I need the main contractor focused on the new properties that we're trying to bring in. So I haven't used it on a full-fledged rehab, but just the maintenance stuff in that company. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share with us about this property? Any last minute advice to a rookie that's looking into getting a BRRRR?
One thing that I will mention as far as so this check and balance system, it's been working really good. One perk you have in Ohio is that a lot of the cities have a point of sale inspection. So this is an inspection that the city does when a property is listed for sale. And so there's a list of things that have to be fixed before the property can change hands. As the buyer, I obviously assume that and those things to fix them. And I sign a paper with the city saying that I'll take care of everything. This is a pretty cool thing because before I even make an offer, I can see a list of all the issues that the city has identified on the outside of the home. Some cities do both inside and outside. So they're going to tell me about the roof. They're going to tell me about maybe does the driveway need repaired? Does what's the roof like on the garage? There's a lot of things that I can look at before I even make an offer to know what the rehab is going to be. And so that's kind of a cool little perk in Ohio. I'm sure it's done in other markets across the nation, but that point of sale inspection is a good tool. So my agent, if I say, hey, I'm interested in this property, will you send me the POS? That's like the first step. I want to look at that, check my numbers, and then we'll make offers.
Justin, I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned earlier because we kind of went through it quickly, but you talked about creating your scope of work for this project. Can you define what a scope of work is? And then how do you go about creating yours being so far away from the property? And I guess kind of as a second part to that question, when you get to the actual finishes, like what kind of, countertops, cabinets, the flooring, how are you going about choosing those as well?
Yeah, I give a lot of power, I guess, to my contractor to pick the stuff. I don't know what colors match. Like that's not my strength. So I kind of let him do this thing there. We've looked at examples of the level of rehab that we want in other properties. So he knows kind of what level to bring it to. We're not going granite countertops. We're not going to the level of like flipping the property because we don't need to, right? We just need it to appraise for a certain amount so we can cash out, refinance, and then put a renter in it. It doesn't need to be, we're not breaking walls down and making it open concept and things like that. We're not just lipstick on a pig either. We are somewhere in between there. So we've kind of established the level of rehab we want. And so he'll give me his first rundown of the scope. It's just listed out. It's not very detailed. And then a price. And then if that looks right, then we wait for the inspection to come through on the house. And then this is the tedious part. Then we get on the phone together. We're doing a screen share and we go through like every picture, everything in the inspection. And I'm like, hey, is this already in your scope of work? If it's not, do we need to do it? And we decide, do we need to do it or not? And so we're building out a scope of work. What I'm not good at is making him get super detailed on like what each item costs. I usually just see kind of chunks of dollar. Okay, painting is this much, and then the kitchen is this much. I don't know. Maybe I should go more finer details there, but that's kind of how we build out the scope of work. And it usually takes kind of an hour-long phone call just to go through every item, every picture, and just build that scope of work out.
That's great, especially for someone who doesn't know what a rehab will cost, doesn't know how to estimate those costs. That's why you leverage the people on your team to help with that. I once had someone tell me that when they have an inspection done, they have the inspector, put together the list of things that are wrong or, maybe need to replace. And he does it in like, okay, what needs to be fixed or replaced within like right away? What needs to be done within the next year? What needs to be done within the next 5 years? And then, what's something that needs to be done within the next 10 years or something like that. And I thought that was great advice too, because it kind of gives you a look down the road too, not at what needs to be done right now, but in the future, what expenses do you need to plan for so that that cost up front too.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah. Okay. Tony, do you want to take us to our mindset segment?
Absolutely, Justin. Thank you so much for sharing all the details on that BRRRR, brother. Like that, so much good content out of that. So I know the listeners are going to love it. But let's roll into the mindset segment, which is one of my favorites. The question that I've got for you, Justin, is before you became a real estate investor, you had all these assumptions about what it was going to be like, what it was going to take, who you were going to have to become, the skills you were going to need. What were some of the misconceptions you had about becoming a real estate investor that you realized once you actually became one?
It just takes longer. It takes longer than you expect it to. Like, I mean, even just closing a deal, like even if you're making cash offers close in 10 days, like very seldom to deliver 10 days. Like sometimes there's always stuff that just gets in the way, and it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder. And there's always going to be something, like even when you're at a certain level of doors, I'm sure you're expanding into new markets or wherever. There's always an obstacle and there's always growth opportunities. And so the mindset for me, the shift was like, oh, wow, this is passive income. This is a great way to build wealth, but it's no picnic. Like there's still stuff. It still requires work. I mean, I was up like when I first got started, I was up like at 4:30 a.m. sending out direct mailers when I first got started. I don't do that anymore, or even now, like this morning, I was from 5 to 6 o'clock. I was just analyzing deals in new markets, just seeing what the numbers look like. So it's definitely takes work, and that's probably one of the biggest things. Like it's sometimes sold as like this, oh, it's passive income, and which it is technically in a way, but there's still a lot of work that goes into it. And so that was kind of a mindset shift that I had to make. Like, hey, we still got to work hard. We still got to put a lot of time into this, and to not get frustrated with sometimes how slow you seem to be going, because you're actually going faster than you think you are.
And we see that all the time. We see it in the Facebook group, the Real Estate Rookie Facebook group. We see it on the forums where people are saying, hey, I've been at this 2 months and I haven't gotten my first deal yet. Or, hey, I've submitted 7 offers and I haven't gotten anything accepted yet. Or I've analyzed 10 deals, but nothing's penciling out. This is a business of large numbers, right? You've got to submit 15, 20, 30 deals. You've got to analyze 100. You've got to keep going. You've got to be at it for several months before that first deal, that first offer is finally accepted. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I'm sure there's a lot of rookies that are listening right now that are thinking, man, I must be doing something wrong because it's taking so long. But in reality, that's how long it takes for almost everybody.
I had to learn. I now have I'm not perfect at it, but when I come up against a roadblock, let's just say, like, for example, hey, when I got started, hey, there's no way I can buy more than one property if I got to put 30% down. That was an assumption based on a lack of knowledge. Like, based on the data I had, that's how I felt. But I started to challenge that. I'm like, there's got to be a way. Like, there's got to be a way. Who knows how to do this? Start searching, Google, whoever, right? Find BiggerPockets and learn about, oh, hey, here's the BRRRR strategy. So there is a way. And so my advice, or what I learned early on, was to challenge the assumptions. Another one was, how am I ever going to fund one of these deals in Ohio if I got to buy it cash for 40 or 50 grand? And I'm like, there's no way I can do that. And so I actually set a goal. It was like towards the end of the year. I set a goal. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out by the end of the year, and I'm going to buy a property by the end of the year. And by setting that goal, and I'm like, this is like, I treated it like life or death. Like, life or death, I have to figure this out. Got super committed. And all of a sudden one day, I don't know if I was like on a run or if I was listening to a podcast, but the idea came to me, well, hey, I have a property, our personal residence, where we have a ton of equity in it. We can just use a home equity line of credit for that first deal. And so, again, just challenging the assumptions, because most of the time, the roadblocks that we encounter are an assumption that we've made based on a limited amount of data. It's like 100%, almost 100% of the time, I swear. Like maybe not 100% of the time, but most of the time when you're like, oh, this is the roadblock I'm up against. If you really look at it, it's just an assumption that you've made based on either inaccurate or not complete data. And if you challenge that and get committed, like we have to figure this out. If this was life or death, how would we get around this assumption, this roadblock? And you'll see the gears start to turn, the lights start to come on, and you'll learn things that can help you get around that. So challenging your assumptions or your perceived roadblocks is a huge thing that I've learned getting started in real estate.
Justin, that was so great. That is awesome advice. I love that. You didn't look at it as to, I can't. You looked at it as, okay, how do I do it? How can I figure it out? And also, I like listening to podcasts, reading books, or talking to other investors and staying engaged with other people in your network. You get those ideas from them, even if they didn't say exactly, go get a line of credit. You still you can create ideas off of what somebody else did or what they were thinking and use that to overcome your obstacle that you have in front of me. But I love the way you look at it, that you're just creating that obstacle. You're making that assumption. So great advice. I think that was one of the best responses we've had on our mindset segment. Going to places where you're constantly hearing success stories was big for me in believing that it could be done. Right. And so BiggerPockets was huge. I think, I don't know how long the Rookie podcast has been around, but it started a little bit later after I started listening to the main BiggerPockets one. But that was huge because I was hearing people succeeding in it every day. And so my mindset, I'm like, there has to be a way. I'm not the first person that's faced this, so there has to be a way. And so that little bit of faith or that little bit of courage, knowing that other people have done it, I'm like, if they can do it, I can figure this out. And that was just a little bit of the motivation that I needed to stay after it.
Justin, I gotta add on to that, because for most people who are venturing off into the crazy world of real estate investing, they might be the only person in their entire network that's thinking about becoming a real estate investor. And when you talk to your Uncle Jim or whoever, and he's saying the market's about to crash, or don't buy that house because, you're going to have people calling you at 3:00 in the morning, like it's easy to get discouraged. So it's super important. I'm glad you highlighted this, to surround yourself with other people who are on the same journey as you and who have completed that same journey, right? Or who are a few steps ahead of you, even better, right? Like if you're at 0 deals, being able to talk to someone who's done 1 deal, that's a mind-opening, life-changing experience, right? To talk to someone who's done 5 deals, that's like, oh my God, like how did you do that? So building the right community, finding the right community is huge. And this is a perfect opportunity for me to plug the BiggerPockets Real Estate Rookie Facebook group. We've got like 30,000 people in there, but there's stories in there all day, every day, about people getting their first deal, their second deal, their 5th deal, and they're sharing how they did it. So, obviously the podcast is a great resource, but connect with people, send them a friend request, send them a message, say, hey, how can I provide value to you? What can I do to help you continue to grow your business, and allow them to give you some value back in return? So I just love that approach, Justin. I had to pause on that so we could highlight that for the listeners.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, you guys, it is time to go to our rookie request line. You guys can reach us anytime at 1-888-5-ROOKIE and leave us a voicemail with your question, and we may play it on our next show for a guest to answer. Today's question is from Kyle in Madison, Wisconsin.
Hi, this is Kyle from Madison, Wisconsin. My question is, I'm at a point now where I'm trying to really figure out my location. Should I be looking at Wisconsin as a whole and trying to find deals that I think make sense in the area? So, in other words, find a deal and then research the area to make sure that deal makes sense in that area? Or should I focus on an area and then wait for a deal to come to me?
I would do all the research I needed to where I had the neighborhoods, like down to the neighborhoods, pinpointed of where I want to have a property, especially if it's a rental or even a flip. I want to know that neighborhoods that are going to work and with my model. And then I'll know that then I'll just obviously watch for those neighborhoods for deals to pop up. And I know that I'm already in a neighborhood and I know the numbers can work. So I guess my answer would be, I would drill down to know which specific zip codes or neighborhoods I want to be in that make sense, that have the right demographics and low crime rate and things like that. And then when a deal pops up, you know, you're comfortable with that area and you can make an offer.
Yeah, I agree with Justin. I think that if you are just looking for deals, then analyze the market. You're going to drive yourself crazy because you're going to be looking all over. You need to find your market and then set your criteria in that market so that when you are analyzing deals, you just go through your checklist. Okay, does this meet the cash flow I want? Does this meet, my appreciation I want? Does this, is this an A-class school district? Whatever your criteria is, find the market first, analyze that, then look for deals in there. And Kyle mentioned, should I wait for a deal to come to me? No, don't wait. There's so many ways to source deals. Having a realtor send you deals on the MLS, that's free, that's easy to do. You can do driving for dollars. You can send direct mail. You can door knock. Tell everybody you know in that market that you're looking for a property to buy. Go to investment meetups. See what's out there, where other people are finding deals. So definitely don't wait for a deal to come to you.
Because what happens, there's certain synergies or efficiencies that happen when you know the areas and the zip codes you want to be in. Because the ARVs are going to be very similar and the rents are going to be very similar. And so you can move a lot faster in analyzing the deal. I mean, I can be at work, in the middle of the day and see a lead pop up on in my email and say, okay, that's this neighborhood. So I just throw it out. Or, hey, that's an area that I want. And I know the rent's going to be about here. I know ARV is about here. That's a deal. Let's throw an offer out. It's so quick once you have the metrics for those neighborhoods down. If you're just going big, man, you're going to be like, okay, well, I don't know. What's the crime in that neighborhood? What's the ARV for the neighborhood? You almost have to redo it for every deal. I get a little more fine tuned and know the numbers for those zip codes in the neighborhood so that you can move a lot faster. Because you're right, especially right now, you've got to be making offers very quickly to get these deals, and so moving fast is going to be huge.
Yeah. So Justin, I want to take us to our next segment here, which is the random question segment. And you kind of touched on this already, but I'm hoping you can maybe articulate it a bit more clearly for the guests. In order to be a successful BRRRR investor, do you feel that it's required that someone have a really handy background? Like, should I know how to lay tile, how to put a backsplash, how to pick out, what are the handy requirements someone needs to have to be a successful BRRRR investor?
No, you don't. I don't think you need that. No, I mean, it definitely helps when you see pictures and you're like, oh, hey, we could do this for that kitchen. I don't have a lot of that, so I lean on my team members pretty heavily and other example pictures. So you don't. I mean, it definitely helps, but you don't. If you get the right team members, then you should be just fine without that. I would not wait around, and I would not study rehab books if you're not going to be the guy or the girl doing the rehab. This has to be passive for me, or as passive as it can be, because I have a full-time gig. So, I can't spend time, I can't swing the hammer, and I can't really even go to Home Depot and pick out tile because it's just I don't have time for that. So I lean on it as in I'm going to hire where I don't have the expertise.
I think that's one of the benefits of investing out of state, is that it really forces you to build the teams, to incorporate the systems, and to focus working on your business as opposed to working in your business. I've always kind of struggled with the fact that I'm not super handy, and I can't go out there and lay down the flooring or update the backsplash or, put up drywall. But at the end of the day, my job as a real estate investor isn't necessarily to know how to do those things, but it's to know how to run the numbers to include the cost of having that job done. And as long as the deal still makes sense after accounting for those things, then I've done my job as a real estate investor, because now I've still got a good deal. So I just know a lot of times people kind of struggle with, them not having the technical knowledge of doing some of that repair work. But I'm glad you highlighted that it's not always necessary. Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm, and farmers are really good at just figuring it out. I mean, they're mechanics and they're veterinarians. They have tons of skills. So I could probably figure out how to put a countertop on. But again, I don't want another job. I don't want to be doing that because I have my other things. And honestly, I tell people this all the time. I would probably follow this same method of acquiring properties using this team, even if the property was across the street from my house, I would still send my inspector. I would still send the contractor. Like, it would be exactly the same. I would be selling solar and I would send my team, even if it was right here in my neighborhood. And because that's the model, that's the business that I want. So it just depends on what your ultimate goals are, I guess.
That's great. Thank you, Justin. For my question, I'm wondering, does your property management company use software, and is that you get your owner reports from, stuff like that? We always hear from, the property management side of the software, but I'm curious about your experience as an owner, using the app, using the software to look at your rent roll, to look at your income statement, to pull your owner reports.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome at that. I get a monthly statement of where all the expenses have been, what the rent income has been, and then what the distribution to my bank account is going to be, which is the funnest part. So yeah, I get really good details. I had to kind of learn how to interpret it initially. I didn't know what I was looking at first, but they walked me through it, and yeah, I get really good reports. I can go see, they got not a portfolio, but a platform where I can log in and I can see the properties. I can review all those documents. It's pretty slick. Yeah, they do a good job with that.
I think that's a huge advantage when you're going with a property management that has all of those departments, like you mentioned before, and is a larger company, because they have that software. I mean, you can log in right now and look at, is there a vacant unit coming up? You can look at who your tenants are. You can look at who paid rent. And then you also get those monthly emails.
Yep.
So what would be your advice for someone seeking out a property management company on looking at the software? What are some things you really like that you're getting from your property management on the report side?
I would definitely just ask for examples of the reports that you're going to receive as the investor. What do the financials look like? Is it easy to show? Is it easy to see where your money is going as far as the bills that you're paying and any maintenance that's being done? Just seeing that is super big. And then again, I already said this, but the responsiveness. If I have a question on that, I need to be able to email or call and get a pretty quick response. And that's probably been the biggest thing for me on this property management company, is just their responsiveness. So ask for examples, have them show you the online portal of how to use it, how it functions, and what their process is like. That's been huge.
Awesome, Justin. Well, thank you for sharing that, brother. So before we start wrapping up the podcast here, Ash and I want to give a quick shout out to one of our real estate rookie rock stars. So today's rookie rock star is Gus O'Feely. And Gus actually already has 11 rental units, but he put down 20% on all of those. But Gus just closed on his first BRRRR deal. So I just want to run through the details really quick. It was a 4-bedroom, 1-bath, single family house. He bought it for $70,000. Put another $40,000 into the rehab. So his total all in was about $110,000. And the ARV was $160,000. So a pretty solid BRRRR. And he's planning to rent that out for $2,000 per month. So much like you, Justin, he realized that, the capital wasn't going to last forever. Seems like he did a few more deals than you did before he made that change. But congrats to you guys for knocking out the park, brother.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell everyone where they can find out some more information about you and maybe reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm probably the most active on Instagram, at the Money Maven Project on Instagram. That's where I share everything. Initially, the reason I share it is because I feel like it's just, again, I was helped so much by other people sharing their stories. So I share as much as I can on there, but at the Money Maven Project on Instagram is going to be the best place. You can find my podcast and website there through Instagram.
Justin, thank you so much. I hope everyone got a ton of value from this podcast episode today. Make sure you check Justin out on Instagram and join our Facebook group. And don't forget to subscribe to our very new YouTube channel, Real Estate Rookie on YouTube. Every week, we're going to be putting out new videos, and we also have all of the podcast episode recordings uploaded onto there now, too. I'm Ashley at Wealth from Rentals, and he's Tony at Tony J. Robinson on Instagram, and we'll see you guys on Saturday for our next Rookie Reply.